welcome to Attribution Time. Michael, thanks for being on.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I am pumped about it. I was thinking about it earlier. I get excited about all of the people that are on. I don't want anyone to hear and feel otherwise, but this is a really fun topic. I've learned a ton from you and what you're doing at Recast with media mix modeling. So part of it is just the world I don't live in, which is what makes it so fun. I live in the multi-touch attribution space, and I don't know how somehow you got into my feed. The LinkedIn algorithm working properly. You're talking about media mix modeling, and it resonated really well with where I stand as far as the value of attribution. And so, yeah, tell me a little bit. Give me the story of how you got into what you're doing at Recast with media mix modeling, and how you came about solving and using media mix modeling.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks again for having me. The story of Recast starts with work that I was doing when I was running the data science and analytics team at Harry's. Some of our listeners, if you're male, you've probably heard of this brand. You've surely been advertised to. They used to sell razors on the internet. Now they sell lots of different brands basically everywhere. But back when I started, they sold razors on the internet. And my team there, we did all of the stuff, right? We did multi-touch attributions. I'm very familiar with that. We built our internal solution. We did experimentation. We did LTV forecasting, all of that stuff. But as the business got more complex and, they started selling at Target and Walmart and Amazon and started advertising more on out of home, like billboards and television and radio, we sort of realized that the multi-touch attribution tool that my team had built, and so I loved dearly, but it just wasn't telling us the whole story about what marketing was most effective for the holistic business. And so that led me down the path of learning about media mix modeling, which is what CPG companies have been doing for like 60 plus years in order to measure the effectiveness of their marketing spend. If you think back to how Pepsi would measure their marketing spend 30 years ago, there's no clicks, there's no e-commerce at all. And so what they did was they used statistics and econometrics to do it. And so I started doing a deep dive on media mix modeling and how it worked. I thought that with the development of a bunch of new statistical algorithms and massive computing power and the cloud, you would be able to build a new version of media mix modeling that was a lot more effective than what had been possible in the past. And so that's what we're doing at Recast. We're trying to build the next generation of marketing science tools with this sophisticated modeling software that will help the next generation of omni-channel marketers to effectively and efficiently measure and then optimize their marketing budgets.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Media mix modeling has been around forever, right? Not forever, but it's been around for a while. But it seems to have picked up some momentum as of late. And you and I were talking. You like to think that you added to that with what you're posting on LinkedIn. I can't disagree with you because they got into my feed. But yeah, I think it's a really interesting concept of the balance of multi-touch attribution and media mix modeling. And as you mentioned, it's using the statistical analysis to be able to project where to invest your dollars, where to go, which is different than the multi-touch attribution space, which is, okay, we invested XYZ dollars into channels or campaigns. What's the outcome of that? And then that way you can know, okay, coming up next year, we can invest more dollars here and less dollars there. And they kind of work in different spaces in that sense. I guess what's your approach, or what's your experience with the multi-touch space as you worked at Harry's or other places?
Yeah, so I think multi-touch attribution and other types of digital tracking methodologies will always have played an important part in the digital marketer's toolkit, right? It makes a lot of sense. You want to know who clicked on which ads prior to purchase. With the app tracking transparency, which has reduced some of the ability to track people across sessions and devices, and then the removal of cookies from the Chrome browser, it's getting harder to do all of some of the fancy stuff that some of the multi-touch attribution tools were able to do in the past. But I still do think that it will continue to play a role, especially first touch, last touch attribution are They continue to be very valuable reports to look at if you do any sort of e-commerce at all. And I think they will continue to be very valuable reports to look at far into the future. So I think they're important tool sets with any type of tool that you're using, especially in like the advanced analytics space. You just really need to be aware of what the limitations are. And I think this is the place where marketers actually got into trouble over the last 10 or 15 years is they got these really nice reports that were very clear about, who clicked on an ad prior to purchase, but some people failed to think critically about exactly what that meant and where it could go wrong and what the core limitations of that report are. And that's a place where I think, this sort of over the next couple of years, marketers already have started to start to ask themselves the hard questions, which is one of the reasons why MMM has grown in popularity as a topic. But it's going to continue to happen where people need to start looking at these reports and not just thinking about, oh, great, we have a CPA of $40 on a last click basis, and start to think about, well, how could that be wrong? Right. And what are the other ways that we can corroborate that? Or how should we think about that in the context of these other measurement methods? And that is what I think the next generation of marketers are going to have to do over the next couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely. And to take a step back, one of the key distinguishers with MTA and MMM is that high level overview of, hey, we spent this money and how, and then it helps you understand where to continue to invest your dollars and be able to forecast based upon a variety of different things, depending on whatever you put in your system. But the most common would be like a pandemic ahead. So you can actually track and add these things into it, so it gets a part of that computation. Multi-touch attribution is individualized. So even in a B2B perspective, it's still one-to-one as far as those engagements. So as what Michael's saying here, and I think this is again, I agree with the reason why media mix modeling is increasing is as the deprecation of cookies happens and people have more power around, yes, I want to be tracked, or no, I don't want to be tracked. Media mix modeling still enables you to be able to report on where to invest your dollars, and as far as an ad level and conversion rates, where the multi-touch attribution may lose some of that insight. And though people are engaging on specific web pages because they might fill out a form or whatnot, you may lose some of the additional insight of ad spend and things of that sort. So again, that's where you start seeing these combinations take place. But to your point, Michael, 100%, people are becoming much more intuitive, a lot more asking a lot more challenging questions. Where back in the day, it was just, you had Google told you that their ads accumulated to revenue, and that was, you had no reason to ask otherwise, because you could easily see one-to-one and you could just pump money towards it. And we're getting to a point where people are having to be a lot more strict with how they're spending their money. There's a lot of other factors involved in that of why that's the case, but money's not as easy to come by and some of these departments. And so it's really helpful to have a media mix tool.
I also think, so I think that's 100% right. And I think the other factor is, well, there's sort of like an ecosystem maturity, and then as well as like an individual company maturity. And my belief is that, if you're a startup or a small company and you're only advertising on one or two digital channels, you do not really need to be thinking about a media mix model. It's not going to add very much to you. First touch, last touch report, if you're only advertising on Facebook and Google, that's really all you need. That's going to get you really far. That's awesome. The place where it starts to get more complicated is when you have these much more complex full funnel marketing campaigns where you're doing billboards, you're doing TV, you're doing radio, streaming TV, YouTube, and then all of the social channels. That's the place where, there's a lot of reason to believe that you're not going to see all the clicks. You don't get a click from a billboard. You don't get a click from a linear TV channel. Even a lot of streaming TV and YouTube, you're not going to observe clicks at there's a good chance that a lot of those ads are having a lot more of an impact than what you're going to observe via clicks or even impression tracking. And so that's the place where, as brands are starting to grow in maturity and get more omni-channel, and sort of the ability to just like, we're only going to advertise on Facebook and Google for years, like it's less possible now, at least as far as growing brands go. And so that has led people to start to ask this question of like, okay, if I want to get into advertising on TV or digital video, what is the right method of measuring that? And it's not like MTA, I think, has more issues with those types of channels just because of the nature of inherently being able to observe clicks or necessarily observe impressions and link them back to different individuals.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm curious what the TV world. I mean, the QR code. Speaking of things that have been around forever, the QR code's been around forever. And when the pandemic hit, it became like now everyone can use a QR code. But it's been, it's one of those things. And you're starting to see that even on TV ads where people are able to scan that, and now that information is tracked, right? You're like because you're watching an ad on TV, you scan that. Now you can have that inside the system. Like it's
yeah, but how
many
times have you scanned one of those codes?
That's fair. That's fair. I know. That's why I'm like, there's this scale, right? As things move out elsewhere. But I'm right there with you. Way to call me out on that, Michael. I can't take it out of the podcast because that's too real. Yeah, I think that's an interesting point though, with the maturity of data. So what's your approach with that maturity of data as far as here's all these different sources? As you mentioned, hey, if you're doing one or two sources of data, media mix modeling is not your case. You could easily do basic forms of multi-touch attribution to get what you need. But as you get to those more complex paths of all these different data sources, I mean, I've seen where people, not only is there company silos, marketing and sales, but that then leads to data silos of those different places, of those different units within the org. Like, and then within marketing, you have those different data silos because lead gen's responsible for all their Google and paid ads, and then the demand gen teams work in these other streams, and so they're monitoring those. So how do you manage that?
I mean, look, it's hard. This is a place where and this is like a, almost a do as I say, not as I do situation. Like Recast is a startup, and we do advertising and we do marketing, and our data warehouse is not set up. It is not good. So like we're still very early in the journey. But we work with some like very big B2B companies that are very mature. And I think the best in class companies invest in data quality early. They see it as being a core part of how they do business and how they are able to drive efficiency in their go-to-market teams. And so they've invested in data warehousing. And they have a central location that has all of their relevant marketing and go-to-market activity, and that could be sales contacts. It could be, the marketing spend on the different marketing channels that they're active in, which conferences they went to, right? All of that information is stored in one location. And the great thing about that is like, one, it makes like answering lots of basic questions about what's happening a lot easier because you can, they have a BI tool, you can build these nice reports and dashboards. And then beyond that, it also makes doing more sophisticated analysis a lot more possible because all of a sudden, okay, we already have all of the data ready to go. If we want to analyze, what was the lift in sales qualified leads associated with going to this conference, because they know the data of the conference, they have the sales qualified leads tracked. They also have all of their other marketing activity. So you can, build a statistical model that controls for it, right? There's a lot of stuff that opens up, including fairly straightforward analyses, but going all the way to doing a marketing mix model. Like it's very easy for Recast to work with them because we can just plug into the data that they already have set up. So I think if you're one of these companies, right, you want to figure out like, what is the right time to do that investment. But I think if you're on the path to becoming, a really large, multiple 100-person company, like you probably want to think about, hey, it is going to be a good investment to get all of this marketing data into one central location so that we can start to do stuff with it.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's a rise in my mind with the Snowflakes of the world, and just whoever else is managing those. I mean, they've been around forever, but with these larger organizations, and I say this often, but especially with the rise of machine learning and AI, like if those data points are disparate, then it's hard for anything to really learn off of it. So same as media mix modeling, to be able to take this and run against that. It's algorithm. It's the same for AI. It's the same for machine learning. Like you just can't get the insights you need as much as the teams don't want to work together. That's just essential.
I think that's 100% right. But also, like, if you're a leader at one of these companies, you need to get these teams to want to work together. Like, that's
Yeah,
the other
that's right.
piece is like, hopefully if these teams are like antagonistic, like you have maybe a different, bigger problem you need to go solve first. But
Yeah.
hopefully you have a world where, sales sees marketing and knows that like, they need marketing's help to get the leads, and marketing sees sales and it's like, okay, we need you to help close the deals, and everyone's incentivized to work together.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the things I've really enjoyed about attribution, especially as I started in the space, is I was talking to marketing teams who purchased it, and then I was saying, hey, we have to pull someone in from sales to have XYZ conversations, right? To understand how are they logging data in their Salesforce, and being able to start and being a kind of the mediator between that. And I really enjoyed that. And I think attribution and that what's held to be true in that is that attribution is one that brings different parts of the organization together. Like they have to start working together. They have to start communicating. And I've done that a number of times within different organizations. But with media mix modeling, it's still essential. But I'm curious, how do you categorize, or how do you measure or run against sales activities? Because again, I don't live in that space, so I'm really curious. How do you go about that? Like how is that inputted? How do you ingest that? What's the outcome of it? Curious what you've seen.
Yeah, so this is really tricky. So first of all, in general, media mix modeling is much harder for B2B type businesses than it is for like consumer type businesses.
Sure.
Everything in marketing analytics is harder for B2B businesses than for consumer businesses. So I know that I'm like preaching to the
Yeah,
choir here, but I do just want to flag that. And I think
that's
there are
good to
some
call it out for
businesses.
those that are listening, right? It when I come, I live in a B2B world, but media mix modeling is making its approach into B2B. And I should have prefaced that in the beginning of the call, but it's a great call out, Michael. Like media mix modeling really lives in the B2C space, but we are seeing this movement of more B2B people being interested in this. So that's a great call out, and I think it's good for the listeners here.
And I think, just to add on to that a little bit, like the companies that I think are best set up to use something like media mix modeling in the B2B world are the B2B companies that look a lot like B2C companies, right? Where
Yeah,
you have like an
right.
SMB type world where like there really are hundreds of thousands, millions of different customers for you. You're using a lot of the same sort of marketing channels that a B2C business might use. Your go-to-market looks more like that. Those types of businesses are more conducive to a media mix modeling approach, like enterprise, like true enterprise, where it's like our company does 3 deals a year and they're like
Yeah,
all worth tens of millions of dollars.
yeah,
Not nearly as conducive to media mix modeling, really not conducive at all. And so
yeah.
depending on where you are on that spectrum, this tool, may or may not be useful to you just because of the amount of data that we're talking about, or the amount of events that we're talking about. If there's only 3 deals closed a year, you can't really build a statistical model against that. There's just not enough data points. But if you're having like, you get tens of thousands of leads a year, and most of them a lot of them convert, and some of them go into your sales funnel, you have hundreds of salespeople, that you can plausibly make it work. But so that's sort of about who this is for. And then talking about how do you think about integrating like sales data into a media mix model? The first answer is like carefully, because there's a lot of ways that you can screw this up. So I
Sure.
want to say like be careful if you are going down this path. The reason why you can screw it up is because the way that it works functionally, right, like in your business, is people are moving through the funnel. They like get experience to marketing, and then they engage with your site, and then maybe they submit a lead request, and then a salesperson reaches out, and then they have a call, and they text them, and then you start doing some account-based marketing. And the problem is that you don't get to doing the texting from the salesperson until you've done a bunch of other stuff. And so the texting is conditional on the other things that have already happened further up the journey or further up in the funnel. And the way most media mix models work out of the box is they sort of assume that marketing activity is independent. And so that's not the case in what I just described. And so if you just like throw these variables in to like, one of the out of the box online open source tools like Robin or Lightweight MMM, you're going to get bad results because you're effectively breaking the assumption that is required for that model to work. And so be careful is the first thing. And so the way that we think about handling it is you really want to have like at least a two-stage or a multi-stage model where your model has some understanding of the relationship between the marketing activity on one side and then the things that are further down the funnel that are caused by that marketing activity. So things like, again, engagement with sales are often further down the funnel. And so you need to have your model needs to have some understanding of that relationship, that you're not going to be texting people from a sales associate unless they've already somehow engaged with your brand, probably from some of the marketing activity that you're doing. As long as you have some understanding of that in your model, then you really just want to track, the most important parts of this sales activity. And so often that's like number of touches. It could be things like, did someone attend a webinar? All of those variables can fit in, but the trick is making sure that you're not breaking the fundamental assumptions of your modeling methodology by including things that are endogenous to the model or that are actually dependent on marketing activity that's happening further up the funnel. Hopefully that made sense. We got a little bit into like the technical statistics
I like
there,
it.
but hopefully that was clear.
I like it. I think I got maybe 50% of that, and that's okay for those listeners. Hopefully they're able to get a little bit deeper into it. There's a lot more intelligent people out there than myself, you being one of them. So I think I love when people really get to start nerding out about what they're passionate about, because it's fun to like listen to, and obviously I get to learn from that. Let me ask you, let's take it to the next stage. So you have those different pieces, and I think this applies a little bit, but what if or can you, and do you see this where people use MMM for obviously the initial sell of the deal, but what about like different sales cycles? Like, so now we have renewals, things of that sort. Are you running those models in those circumstances, or do you see it primarily in that early new customer engagement life cycles?
Yeah. So we primarily see it in new customer oriented KPIs. So we think about like a model will have some outcome variable, which is the KPI. In general, the reason why that is because marketing teams tend to be the ones who are most focused on using an MMM, and marketing's job in general in most businesses is to drive new business. And you might have like a few campaigns that are renewal oriented, but that's going to be some very small fraction of your total budget. And I think a lot of what drives renewal is not the marketing, right? It's product things, it's the customer success, it's all of those other factors. And so like you could maybe run a model, but I just don't think it's going to give you that many useful insights. So the vast majority of people are using it for, hey, what's driving sales qualified leads for us? And mostly being focused on the market, the paid media that is driving that activity.
Yeah. No, that's good insight, because something I've played around with my mind. I was having this I think it was the second session I had. It was with Drew Knoll, who's really intelligent in the go-to-market space. But he kind of like made me think differently about multi-touch attribution. We don't want to always measure everything, right? That's a caution. But one of the things is there's a patternization across every motion of sales, like whether it's the initial sale, if there's a renewal. And to your point, Michael, like you just said, like it's not as much marketing, but like even those data points, like I was having a conversation with who's in like partner marketing and partnerships. And how can we actually understand and begin to monetize these different actions? So yeah, like there's teams that are dedicated to these accounts. Can we measure these actions in some capacity to be able to run against this and say, hey, this is what we found to be, this is the secret sauce? And that, that gets to the point where a lot of people would say, don't over attribute, don't do this and that. But I mean, we're at a place with the amount of data in which we can collect, the amount of data in which we can run these things, the speed in which AI runs at nowadays. Like, it just seems like, why not try something like that?
I mean, this is an interesting question. This is honestly something that I struggle with as a business leader who is trying to think about, like, we're spending money on. We have a bunch of different marketing activities that we do. We spend money on marketing, but I actually I'm on the side of like, don't over attribute and don't try to overthink it, because I think the problem is that there are going to be holes and there's going to be biases in these measurement methods. And so if you put too much focus on trying to track every click and make every connection, then you can often lose the forest for the trees, right? And you're focused on the trees, which is like, what did people click on and what were we able to successfully track? And you lose the forest where you say things like, well, we've been doing a bunch of this activity and it really feels like it's working. We get on sales calls and people mention it. We don't have a lot of clicks to link for a variety of different reasons because you just can't.
Yeah.
But it does feel like it's working. Like our volume is definitely up since we've put more effort into this, and people are talking about it, and we're getting more cold inbound than we ever have before. Like I think as a business leader, I myself want to be attuned to that and sensitive to that, and I don't want to like get distracted by the channels that are easiest to track because they're good. Like LinkedIn is really good at tracking clicks. Like they're good at it because they've been doing it forever. But like there's other activity that we do that I think has more of an impact on the business than paid LinkedIn ads. And so I don't want to get distracted by what's the easiest things to attribute as opposed to what do I think strategically is really helping our business. And then even just like intuitively feels like it's moving us in the right direction.
Yeah, that's a good word. I mean, I think that's wise, right? Because you can really do that. And you can have people solely dedicated on how to make sure all this data works, because it takes time to manage data just in general. Like there's people out there that's what they do. They're managing a data warehouse. It's nothing else other than that. And so there's a lift in that, and you have to even consider those ROIs of, is that worth our time to pay for this person's time to just be doing that, right? Like there's the internal ROI involved in it as well. So I think that's a good word in that. So tell me a little bit more about what Recast is doing, where y'all are headed, what's the 2024 looking like?
It's a good question. I mean, we're feeling great. Recast is growing really fast, which is fun. As you mentioned, a lot of people are talking about MMM, and so it's a good time to be in the measurement business. Our vision, right, is to build the marketing science and planning platform for the next generation of marketers. And so it definitely includes MMM, but we're starting to add on a bunch of these tools on like MMM. I think a lot of people think of it as like, okay, yeah, like you'll get a report that says what channels are performing, which is interesting, but not that actionable. We sort of think a lot about, well, how do you actually move along the actionability spectrum to get to something that's like really useful for actual marketers? And that's where we think a lot about how do we do budget optimization, right? And automated recommendations for how you can reallocate your marketing dollars, and doing things like forecasting and scenario analysis of like what would happen if X or what would happen if Y, and how do you build a tool that allows marketing teams to explore those what if scenarios. And then I think there's a lot of room to continue expanding that platform to encompass more parts of marketing science and really helping marketing teams make better decisions based on the data that they have. And so that's the vision for where we're headed.
Nice. I love it. Well, Michael, thanks for being on Attribution Time. This is super insightful. I know others that are listening to are going to find a lot of insight from it. So I appreciate your time today.
No, thanks for having me. This was a fun conversation. We could do 3 more hours of this.
Sure. Yeah, that's right.